All right, this afternoon we're going to particularly look at the area of marriage, and I know many of you here are married. Some of you looking around would like to be married. We'll be free after this program. Just bring someone along and we'll marry. Marriage is fun. It's got its challenges, but it's fun. And so what I'd like to do is to share with you this afternoon some research that I treasure and value. I met personally the person that I'm basing this on, Dr. John Gottman. When I did some study into marriage research just a couple of years ago, I looked up the Google, right? We go to Google for just about everything now. And sort of typed in advice for married couples. Serious, there is no end of material out there. And in fact, I added up, I wrote a list of all the different things that advised us on what we do to build a good marriage. There were over 100 of them in just the number of articles that I found. So there's no end of data out there. Why would I like to share with you what I'm doing today? Number one, I want to share with you some stuff from Sharon Hart Morris, or Sharon Morris May. She's the daughter of Dr. Arch Hart, who's recognised as one of the best-known Christian psychologists and writers. He's written a number of books on marriage and sleep. His current research and project is on sleep. And I hope you're getting enough sleep. You and I need 8.5, 9 hours every night. If we're stressed, we need more. Some interesting stuff coming out on sleep. If you don't get that number of hours sleep in a night, don't panic. You've got 7 nights to catch up. If you don't catch up within those next 7 nights, you'll never catch it up, and it'll catch you later on when you get older. That's the research. It's kind of fun stuff you can look into. We're not on sleep today, but that's Dr. Arch Hart. His daughter Sharon written some really lovely stuff. The main research I want to refer to, John Gottman, for those of you who weren't with us this morning, why do I value his material? One, because it's based on just not a hunch, it's not a guess. And I think I've got a couple of quotes from him at the start. If not, I'll share with you. But he certainly did a huge amount of work over many, many years and tracked a lot of couples. And I just feel as if what he says is genuinely and solidly based in research. I feel as if we can hang our hat on it, rather than just somebody coming up with a good idea. There's a text in Scripture that I present to you. I think it's a good one. This is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight, so that you may be able to discern what is best to the glory and praise of God. Now, I love that text because it reminds us that love is a growth thing. Love is something we grow into, not just fall into. And we grow in our love, and it's what we call dynamic, not static. It's constantly on the move. And it's exciting that we can add more and more knowledge and depth of insight, and so that's certainly our prayer for today. In 1939, women ranked love 5th as a factor in choosing a mate. Any of you here in 1930? No, it's okay. All right. By the 90s, it topped lists for both women and men, and college students now say that their key expectation for marriage is emotional security. And that's interesting, isn't it? If you'd said that to me as a young man, I would have asked you, what do you mean by that? Emotional security. But we're now recognizing that the heart of any union is the emotional connection. Emotional intimacy speaks to the very heart of the marital union. While a couple may share creative intimacy, recreational intimacy, or spiritual intimacy, it is the emotional connections that especially hold and unite a couple together. So you and I know that when we feel very close to the one we love, we feel as if we're just on the same page and we're emotionally in tune and connected. We take on the world. When there's that tension and hurt, it's a little different. We long for that emotional connection. It is the emotional union that allows a couple to expose their loneliness, open up their hearts, express their fears, and reveal their dreams. Jack and Judy Balswick, researchers at Fuller. So how does intimacy happen? What are some of the factors that influence intimacy in marriage? Let's have a look at what Sharon Morris made. Your little worksheet there, it's simply just a record sheet. You're welcome to jot it down. And she said there's 3 main building blocks for building intimacy, what we long for. Thanks, Chris. If you're missing one, really appreciate Chris and Marlene's work and their helper in putting the paperwork together for today. So if you need a sheet, it's coming around. You might want to make a paper aeroplane, that's fine, but if you'd like a little record of what we're sharing, by all means grab a copy. And I know Chris has got some pens if you need one. So they discovered there are 3 key building blocks to building intimacy. And we're going to look at those together. Then with that in mind, what we're going to do then is go to John Gottman's research, where he tracked hundreds of couples. And we're going to have a look at what he discovered there, and I think it'll all fit together like a glove. So number 1, Sharon Morris-May suggests that the core building block for developing intimacy is trust. And that makes sense. Let's have a look at what she talked about though. She said truthfulness trust. Number 1, truthfulness trust. Your partner can be relied on to always tell the truth. You and I, in our marriages, will never sustain and build intimacy whatever we have any sense of distrust or lack of trust. And so when I come home from somewhere, and my wife Carol, she says, "Where have you been, honey?" I've been down sharpening the mower blades with the boys, right? She needs to know that's where I've been. But if she finds herself saying, wonder where he really was, it's going to be very, very difficult to build a sense of intimacy together. And if Carol comes and I say, "Where you been, honey?" She says, "I've been out shopping with the ladies." And I think, wonder where she's really been. We're in trouble. Intimacy isn't going to grow in that kind of setting. We need this really honest, deep trust with each other. Number 2, good judgment trust. Your spouse can be relied upon to make good judgment calls. And we know, if you have a relationship where you're not quite sure what your husband or your partner, wife is going to come home with, what they're going to do, And so I drive in the driveway with my car, and on the back is a trailer, and inside are 7 fridges in the trailer. And Carol's saying, "Hey, where have you been?" "I've been shopping." "I can see that. What have you got?" "I've got 7 fridges." "What have you got 7 for?" "They're on special." In a series, It's going to be a bit tricky to build a sense of, how do I deal with this man? Number 3, reliability trust. Your spouse will be dependable, honest and truthful, respectful, responsible, reliable. And so if I say to Carol, "Honey, I want you to meet me at 4 o'clock at George Street," I do my best to be there at 4 o'clock. Thankfully, we've got mobiles these days. We can ring and say, "Hey, I'm not going to make it." But if I say, "Hannah, I'll be there at 4," and she rises up and it's 4:45, and that happens time after time after time, it gets pretty wearing. And that sense of being reliable, it sounds pretty simple, but it is, I guess. Being reliable, being able to know that we've got that sense of it's okay and we can rely on each other. And finally, she said, heart trust. You know that no matter what, your spouse will always value you and care for you. This is the deepest level of trust the human heart can give or receive. And I've heard Sharon present on this, and she said it's like taking your heart and giving it to your partner and say, "Will you please look after this for me?" And knowing that our partner's got our very best interests, they've got our heart, they've got our core to who we are. And so she felt those 3 core things, or that core one, first of all, is so important. Then the next one is the emotional availability. Chris, you work in chaplaincy, hospitals, prisons, hospitals mainly, and you work very closely with people at all stages of their life cycle, but often in crisis. And I guess you and Marlene as a counsellor know that emotional component is just core, and you're working very closely with people who are very close to their emotions. And Sharon found that in healthy marriages, spouses are not only physically available, but they make their hearts available to each other as well. Research shows that marital satisfaction is highly correlated with whether a person perceives a spouse to be emotionally and psychologically available to them. One of the problems for us as busy men is that we think we're home when we're in the house, but we're not home. We can be in the house, but we're not home, because we're not emotionally, psychologically available to our partners. We're still in our work mode. We come in and we're at the computer, we're reading the paper, we're not available. And one of the things I had to learn as a young man in marriage was exactly that. I didn't do it well. Learning to be emotionally available, not only physically available, but emotionally available. Learning what it is to share emotions And a little personal story here this afternoon, just to illustrate that. I think I mentioned to you this morning, I did this course that I love doing. It was a 23-week course on relationships. It was just fun. And we're just people from the street that selected to do this course. I saw the course, I thought, I need to do that. So I went along, and we'd been going 5 or 6 weeks, Chris. And we're sitting in this big circle. There's about 24 of us in this big circle. And I was sitting on this chair, just like one of these, in the group. And this girl with long hair, I can still picture, she was sitting over about there in the circle. And she looked across at me and she said, Trafford, I love the way you ask questions. And we just done this segment on how to ask questions. So she said, I love that, you do that so well. I really admire the way you ask questions. But who are you? And I immediately had 48 eyes just boring into me, 46, the other two. And my immediate reaction was I leaned back in my chair, not even aware that I was doing, you lean back in the chair? And the group leader, she was sharp. And she was sitting beside me and she said, hold it there, hold it there, hold it. And I thought, hello, here we go. She said, Trafford, how are you feeling just now? I had no idea. I was never taught how to feel. I didn't have a vocabulary for it. And I said something really intelligent. Weird. She said, Trafford, we've just had a segment on concrete. That means we clearly define how we're feeling. Would you like to have another go? How are you feeling? How's your stomach going? It's going round and round. What are your hands like? Oh, they're sweaty. And as I said that, this little Asian guy sitting beside me reached out and touched me on the leg. And the group leader spun to him and said, what did you do that for? And I thought, oh, good, now they can look to him. And he said, I just want to let him know I was with him. She said, Trafford, have a look how you're sitting. And it was the first time I was sitting right back in my chair. And I looked around, there was a door right behind me. I said, I think I'm trying to get out the door, Well, she said to me after that, she said, look, Trafford, my car's broken down. Can you take me home? It's on the way. I said, sure. We got in the car. We did about 200 metres. She said, you're a pastor, aren't you? And I said, yes. She said, good. I was out to get you. And I said, oh, thanks very much. She said, no, serious. She said, you've got to learn to feel. You've got to learn that there's a whole world of emotion and it's not available to you at the moment, and this time it was. It was a huge growth experience for me to learn about emotions, because generally us Aussie men, I think things are changing, but we grew up in the times an Aussie boy doesn't cry. He's got to be tough, right? And in our culture, I find it fascinating that when there's a funeral, Chris, you're closer to this than I am, but people often say, how did they cope? Isn't that an interesting question? It's really important that you cope at a funeral. Imagine if you didn't cope. Isn't that an interesting question? How did they cope? And I'll show you how a good Aussie man copes at a funeral. And he coped very well. Didn't lose it, didn't go nuts. Truly. I think somebody who goes, cries and weeps and wails most probably copes better than I do. See, we've got this whole emotion thing I think misunderstood. Emotions are the colours of life. And God wants us to feel. If we read that God got angry, that's a bit upsetting for us, isn't it? The idea of God angry is strange to us. And so the whole emotional world is one. Now, ladies, you feel totally at home with this stuff, right? Generally, emotions are just, you feel comfortable in that arena. Us blokes, And when you cry, oh man, that's tough stuff, isn't it, blokes? When your wife cries, what are you supposed to do? Oh, put on the whole armour of God, here we go. What do we do with our wife crying? It's because don't know what to do with that stuff. But we've got to learn this emotion. She found people who are available emotionally. Then the third one is sensitive responsiveness. So this is going to make sense when we step into John Gottman. A sensitive spouse is one who responds in such a way that you feel understood, validated and cared about. You can share what's on your heart, your thoughts, feelings, needs and desires readily and without fear of criticism, rejection or disinterest. Right? Now, this is really significant. So not only are we developing this deep trust together, but we're emotionally available. We've taken the lid off our emotions and we're taking the risk of sharing those. But when we do share them, we're sensitive responsiveness. Our partner responds sensitively. They let us know, oh wow, thank you for what you've just shared. That's really valuable. But if we do the old Aussie put down, what would you know? You know, we're Aussies are great at put downs, aren't we? We love row, and it's kind of cool. It's part of our culture. True story. There were two guys from our church headquarters in Australia, down at Sydney, who went over to meetings in America quite a number of years ago, and they were the best of mates. But they used to give each other heaps. They were always rubbishing each other. Just everybody knew they were good mates. They would cane each other. And so they're sitting outside this meeting place, waiting for the meeting to start, just doing what they do. Oh, you're stupid. And they're just bagging each other out, you know. And the meeting wasn't starting. It's running late, you know. And finally, someone came up from the American contingent and said, excuse me, gentlemen, you notice we haven't started our meeting. We just feel it would be important that you men put your differences aside before we start the meeting. You know? And these guys fell about laughing even more and said, you've got to know the Aussie sense of humour. But the risk is that sometimes we carry that into our relationships, hurting each other a bit. We've got to be sensitive about how we respond to each other, and we're going to move into that in just a jiff. So let's have a look at a couple of these. When marriages fail, it is not increasing conflict that is the cause, it is decreasing affection and emotional responsiveness. Now, this is Sue Johnson. She's wrote the book Hold Me Tight. She's the co-founder of emotion-focused therapy. And she wrote a fabulous book called this, Hold Me Tight. Notice I think I've got another quote from her. The longing for emotional connection with those nearest to us is the emotional priority overshadowing even the drive for food or sex. That's pretty important. Right? It's what we long for, that drive for connection. And as we said this morning, God has designed that we not be alone. It's a huge, strong drive. The drama of love is all about this hunger for safe emotional connection, a survival imperative we experience from the cradle to the grave. And so it's something that we long for. I was speaking to someone just recently, I forget where, down south somewhere, and she shared with me how just recently her father had died. And she'd never had a message from her father that her father loved her. She longed for that message. And just before he died, she said, Dad, do you love me? Do you know what Dad said? If you don't know now, you'll never know. And he died. And with tears running down her face, she said, I still don't know. We long to be loved, right? And particularly in an intimate relationship, we long to know we're accepted and loved and cherished, and it's a huge drive for us when we long for it. Here's another statement. The lack of emotional responsiveness rather than the level of conflict is the best predictor of how solid a marriage will be 5 years into it. So we often measure how good we're doing in marriage by amount of conflict. A good way to measure is what are we like when we're not in conflict. No. And what it's suggesting is that we can get a sense of how, because of that emotional connection. So this is really important, and I wanted you to hear it this afternoon. The demise of marriages begins with a growing absence of responsive, intimate reactions. The conflict comes later. And this will make even more sense when we move into John's research. So, 60% of all divorces occur not because of fighting all the time, but because of loneliness. Loneliness leads to a parallel marriage. It's like railway tracks and they never meet. And they're always going along and it's looking good and we think, yeah, everything's fine, but there's nothing happening across this way. Alfred Broderick called it the hollow centre. There's nothing happening in the middle. And so we need to recognise the importance of these. Couples marry in hope of having an emotionally connected relationship. All couples fight for this connection. And I have a little title of a talk called Fighting for Love. When you and I have conflict in marriage, what we're fighting for is because we've lost where we were just a while ago when we felt really close. Now we're fighting over something. Why? Because we want to get back to where we were. The crazy thing is we use funny ways of doing it. Right? We break the rules. But that's what we long for. Husbands and wives so long and thirst for this kind of relationship that they'll do anything for one, bitterly argue and fight, even divorce, in hopes of finding one with someone else. And so we long for that emotional connection, we long for that intimacy, and we do anything to get it. The longing for emotional connection, we've already had that one. I think that's a double, sorry about that. Okay, sorry, there's a couple of repeats. copied across a couple of slides. Here we go. In our national survey of long-term marriages, we found 3 common strands in those marriages that are alive and healthy. And this is what they found. Number 1, the marriage relationship comes before other relationships, and that includes work. Right? The marriage relationship is number 1. Number 2, both spouses are committed to growing and changing together. Both spouses are committed to growing and changing. And number 3, here we go. They work at staying close. They work at staying close. Now, I don't know about you who are married here today, but when I was a younger guy, they said, you've got to work at your marriage. And I thought, no. Carol and I, we're in love. It's just going to happen. That's what love's all about. You've got to work at your marriage. All right? It's not happens by default. It's not something that comes along just because you hope it does. All right? Intimacy is something that you and I facilitate, we promote, we make things happen. And so what we want to do is talk about what sort of things can we do to work at staying close. Well, before we do, I'm going to dive into John Gottman now and share with you on another sheet of paper. So if you turn to that other sheet now that Chris, thank you, Footy, for making available. It's the other, what's the colour, Chris? It's the orangey one. This is a very detailed worksheet. It's just got lots of gaps in it and lines. So down this side, okay, we're going to share with you what, if you want to jot them down. Thank you, Chris. Are they coming round now? Coming round now if you haven't got one. And this little worksheet is simply to record something, if you'd like to, from our time together. And I need a timekeeper. So, has someone got a program? When do we... I'm sorry, I should have checked before I left up. When do we finish this segment? Thank you. I need you to look after me. Doesn't say. All right. We'll keep going until someone says time, all right? No, not quite yet. Just okay, time. Okay. So what we're going to do is share with you John Gottman's material, and he called it Masters or Disaster. For those of you who weren't here this morning, let me give you, with the patience of others, what happened. John Gottman was a researcher, and along with another guy called Levinson, he wanted to study marriages. He didn't really have any set theory, and often we start off with a theory to test. He didn't say, I didn't have a theory. He said, all I wanted to know why some marriages dive and some thrive. And so he set up a love lab in Seattle. It sounds like Big Brother. But I was sharing this morning, he set up a love lab, just a unit, and invited couples to come and live there. And there were 3 or 4 cameras on them from 9 in the morning to 9 at night, just simply recording everything they said, how they looked at each other, what they did, how they spent their time together. Right? And then he tracked these married couples. And this research went over many, many years. And he went back and he looked at all the couples and he found out the ones that were divorced. He tracked them down, found out whether they were still together or divorced. And the ones who separated, divorced, he went back and he looked at these videotapes of these couples sitting in this love lab and looked at what they said to each other and how they looked at each other and how they responded to each other and how they responded to stress and all the rest of it. And then he went and had a look at all the couples that survived. And he said, what did they do that's different? And what I want to share with you now is the bad news. Right? Remember, many, many years ago, we ran a program called How Not to Do It. And we did this little skit called How Not to Visit the Sick. And so up on stage, we had a girl in bed with a quilt over, and a lady came along, a young girl, as a student. We did this at university thing. And she demonstrated how not to visit the sick. So she comes into this lady and she says, I bought you some flowers. Well, smell them, and sort of puts them right under her nose, you know. And then she says, oh, how have you been? And this lady says, oh, not too bad. But not too good. Oh, not too good. You ate. Oh, and so this visiting girl tells all the things wrong with her, and it's all about her. And then finally she says, oh, look, the pastor said I've got to quote you a text. So here's a text from the Bible, and she reads one out of Job. May the cankerworm eat your flesh. And it was just brilliant. How not to do it. So we're going to learn how not to do it. So this is learning how. So what did couples do that weren't so good? Are you ready? Number 1. Disaster of marriages. They started off harshly. What John Gottman calls harsh startup. Thank you again, Chris, for all your work. Harsh startup. What do we mean? A harsh startup. I don't think I've got a write up here on it. No, okay. A harsh startup. It's when it's a lot of criticism, a bit of. It's when we put each other down, and it's often with a tone of voice. It's starting off harshly. It's a cruel kind of start off. And John Gottman discovered over his research of these couples that when a couple started off harshly, even though they had a few nice moments in between, it always ended up harshly. So if we see something like there's a letter, an envelope on the table, hello, here we go. What have we got here now? Well, stone the crows, and we start off with this harsh kind of put down, we're in trouble. And he found that couples who disasters of marriage started off harshly. We're going to soften, he said, soften your startup. If you and I have a difference, something that we want to discuss with our partner, soften your startup. Think about, hey, my tone of voice. See, what we forget is tone of voice. You've all done basic communication skills, of course, but Chris, remember the communication thing, the 3 ways we communicate? Words, tone of voice, and body language, right? They've done some suggestions as to what each one of those is worth out of 100% in general conversation. Do you know how much value they've found to be on words? 7%. About 7%. Tone of voice, about 34%. What we do with our body, the rest of it. And they found that when you and I are sharing a message, if we want the real message from the person we're listening to, we're going to go for the tone of voice and how they present themselves, not always just the words. But you listen to 2 people arguing. You said so-and-so, no, but you said no, but you said so-and-so. But how did you say it? How did you say it? And I can call Carol 7 different ways just by one word. Carol, Carol. I'm looking for her, right? Do I say, Carol? Carol, put on the whole armour of God, I'm after you. Carol, if I say, Carol, oh, sorry. Body language. See, tone of voice, it has a huge difference. I can hear my mum saying to my older brother, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. We forget that. So tone of voice is huge. So we've got to be sensitive about harsh stuff. Okay, John Gottman is a Jew. He knows Revelation, the 4 horsemen. So number 2, the 4 horsemen. And it has 4 components to it. All right, so what are these 4 components? Do you remember these, Chris? How good's your memory? Number 1, criticism. Criticism. All right, criticism. Now, there's a difference between criticism and a complaint. I can complain to Carol by saying, honey, you're supposed to get petrol in the car, you haven't. That's creating a problem for us. Let's talk about that. That's a legitimate complaint, okay? Honey, you said you'd pick up all the washing off the floor. That hasn't happened. Let's talk about that. Right? But if I say, oh, you didn't get petrol in the car. You are such a loser. You are so much like your father. Okay. We've now slipped into criticism. Huh? Criticism is when we attack a character assassination. We attack the character of the person. You are such a loser. You are such an idiot. My mum talks about vegetarian swearing, right? We don't use the real swearing, so we do the vegetarian form. You moron, you idiot, you stupid clot. Okay. But criticism is where we character assassinate, right? We put each other down. You are such a twit. You're useless. You're stupid. I would love to go back to when I lived in another state. We lived opposite this family. I don't remember seeing Dad much at all, but Mum would come out with the 2 little boys. There must have been about 10 or 12. I wanted to go and rescue those 2 little kids. Seriously, just about every time you could hang your hat on it, Mum would come out and say, oh, what now, moron? What have we left inside this time? Oh, and she'd just go off about this poor little kid. He'd left his lunch bag inside or something. It was just harsh, man. So criticism. All right. Now the next one is contempt. Contempt. Chris, contempt. How would you define contempt?
I think it's just a harsher form of criticism.
Yeah.
It's just where you've got that real hook in it.
Yes.
You were starting to get contempt with a few of the ways you
Yeah.
said. It's a real hook there.
Okay, it's criticism on steroids, right? But here's the key word. I want you right beside this: disgust. The real issue for contempt is disgust. Now, it takes about 7 years in a marriage for contempt to start to emerge. But if there's so much constant negativity and criticism, what John Gottman calls negative sentiment override, it's where there's a constant circle of criticism and judgment on each other. It builds up so much to the place where we say, you disgust me. And usually we don't use words, we roll the eyes, our partner says something to us, as if, well, what would you know? And it's just this sense of disgust. It's the worst of the 4 horsemen. It's the most cruel, okay? So this is what people do that's going to send their relationship down the gurgler. So contempt. All right, we're going to do a little quiz just now. Brace yourself, Steve. It's going to be okay. All right, which gender, male or female, it would most probably be at risk for using criticism and contempt in the marriage? Women or men? Let's vote. Counting in 3, 2, 1. Men? Women? Those who aren't game to vote because they're sitting beside their partner. Okay. Women. Ladies. You are most at risk for using this stuff. All right? Why? I wonder why that's the case. My guess is because you are the relationship caretakers. You go after the relationship. If there's a problem in a relationship, usually it's the woman who goes after blokes who say, if I don't say anything for a couple of days, it'll be all right. Right? Generally, it's the relationship person in the relationship, kind of the key go after. They did a survey once and they asked men and women to take from the same list of words that they'd like to describe themselves with. Women, you ladies, inevitably chose relationship words. Clear as a bell. Love, warmth, care, kids. That was you. Do you know what blokes chose? Things, power and prestige. Blokes went after things, women went after relationships, generally speaking. All right? We shared last night with the youth. Ladies, you have a hormone in your body to a much greater degree than us men. Do you know what it is? It's not estrogen. Well, you have that, thankfully. Yes, that's true. There's another one. It starts with O. Oxytocin. Oxytocin. Do you know what its nickname is? The cuddle hormone. Yeah. Right? Oxytocin, you can look it up on Google, has quite a range of tasks for you, but it's a bonding hormone. It's especially designed to bond, to build a relationship. Ladies have more in their bloodstream. Now, men get a bit of a burst of oxytocin, but it's ladies who carry the greater amount. And I think for those kind of reasons, maybe it's ladies who you tend to criticise, right? Why don't you pick up your clothes off the floor? Why don't you put the toilet seat down? Why don't they make a toilet seat that automatically closes? That'd be, wouldn't that be cool? Trouble is a bit tricky if it jams. Anyway, okay. Serious, wouldn't that be cool? Save a lot of argument. Best thing they ever invented was plastic toothpaste. Then you don't have to argue whether you're squeezing from the top or the bottom. It doesn't matter where you squeeze it. Before you design an automatic toilet lid, you make a fortune. Okay? Serious. So contempt is where we convey a lot of disgust. Okay, here's the next one. Defensiveness. Me? No, it wasn't me. Defensiveness. We defend ourselves in the argument, okay? Defensiveness. We kind of, we don't own it. And the fourth one, stonewalling. What on earth is stonewalling? John Gottman uses the term, it's where we let our partner know, you just rave on, I'm out of here. And we might do it by, or we read the paper. It could be the TAB, but we're reading the paper, We just does whatever you say, though, I'm not there. We can even walk out. Okay. Now, I used to run marathons. I love running marathons. And so if there was a little bit of energy from Carol, all of a sudden I had this really important urge to do some training. So I'd put my shoes on and run for 2 hours. It's wonderful. And I'd have this powerful speech in my mind to Carol. Boy, if she copped it, she'd mate. And then I'd sort of come back in the house and meant to oil that floorboard. Thinking so she wouldn't know I was home and we could go a little bit longer with peace. That sounds dreadful, but I was a stonewaller. Okay? So stonewalling is where we let I'm out of here. Now, little quiz. Which gender would be at risk for defensiveness and stonewalling? 3, 2, 1. Women? Men? Yay! Aren't we good at that, guys? That's out of the world, defensiveness and stonewalling. So we opt out, we choose out, because we don't know what to do with this emotional stuff. We're not real good at tears and anger and frustration and hurt, so we kind of opt out. So what John Gottman found is this is what disasters of marriage people did. And every now and then you look and say, gee, I was a bit like that last night. That's cool. Every now and then, but when they're constantly running through our marriage, we're going to be in trouble. Number 3, I've put all these up here because we're not going to spend a lot of time on them. Number 3 is flooding. What did John Gottman mean by flooding? Flooding is when there's a negative outburst, a lot of criticism and contempt, we feel emotionally flooded. And he found that when husbands and wives, in a time when there was a lot of anger and conflict, a lot of criticism and defensiveness and stuff, there was this sense of flooding where they were kind of overwhelmed by it all. And attached to that is body language. Now, this is a different meaning to what we normally term body language, which we refer to. Body language is the actual bodily, physical reactions to this kind of stuff, criticism and contempt. And John Gottman, remember I shared with you, we didn't mention this a while ago, but he set up these measures of blood pressure and heart rate and how much moving in the seat and how much sweat. And he found that the body reacts quite significantly and clearly to emotional conflict. Your heart rate goes up. Your blood pressure naturally goes up. And it's quite significant. And here's something to remember. Men, the reaction, or the evidence is quite clear. Our rate of reaction goes higher and stays longer than women. Generally speaking, a woman will soothe easier than us as men. And I felt a little bit comforted by that when I read that, because sometimes if Cara and I would have a time of conflict, and it was the Third World War, and she would say, okay, let's make up and let's kind of put all this, no. I kind of had to carry it a bit longer. It's a sense I needed to live with this a bit longer, and she found it much easier to soothe and warm and connect. And generally it seems to suggest that men do find it a little more difficult. So we've got to learn, men, to soothe and calm ourselves and we talked about adrenaline, so we need to slow things down and calm. And we're going to talk about some strategies about how we can deal with stress and conflict in a jiff. So we've got to recognise that when we are in emotional turmoil, our body's going to let us know. If we stop and listen to our body, it'll let you know. Heart rate's up, blood pressure's up, everything's firing. And here's the key. We talked this morning about adrenaline. What's adrenaline's primary task? Sorry? Yes, the 3 Fs. It drives us. It's a survival hormone. It's a survival thing to allow us to survive. And so if there's a concrete truck coming towards us, right, and the driver's going, and he's totally out of control, you and I know, we stand there, we say, concrete truck. It's out of control. Last time I got hit by a truck, it hurt a fair bit. I think what I might do is get out of the way. Now let me think, right, what happens? Blood drains from our digestive system because we just don't need that carrot juice just now. It goes to our major muscles for movement. It increases our heart oxygen rate. We're out of there, right? Either fight, flight, or freeze. And in some situations, you watch animals in crisis, they just freeze. And some people do it as well. Usually it's either fight or flight. Now think about that. If we're in a conflict situation with our wife or husband, right, even our kids, but if you think that's marriage, what we don't recognise is that adrenaline kicks into our body as soon as our alarm system lets us know that we're in trouble and we're ready for fight or flight. Just when we are supposed to be solving a conflict, all of our body is saying fight or flee. And no wonder we have trouble in conflict. Now, I'm going to take a little side thing, Chris, we need to share with them. Remember Sharon Morris's made about the alarm system, and to tell you quickly about this one. You and I don't realise, but inside us, a part of us, God, I think, has designed us what she calls a relationship system. It's a neurobiological system. It works like this. It works simply like your pain system. Men, you and I, we're doing the cooking as we did for our lunch today. And we happen to touch the hot stove, right? What do we do? That's hot. In fact, I think I can smell something burning. You think about, right, the incredible rapid response when we touch a hot, it's just immediate. That is a neurobiological system, all right? The messages are flat out between our brain and our body loading us. It's danger, get your arm off there. And you think about it, relaxes this muscle, contracts this one, gets the arm quickly. Our alarm system for emotional arm works exactly the same. And you want to have an alarm system here that alerts us to when our relationship is not ideal. And it's triggered by a look, a frown, a word, a tone of voice. And what happens down inside your brain here, the front of your brain here, is what we call the prefrontal cortex. This is the CEO of your brain. Look after it. This is where you make all your moral decisions, right and wrong, truth and error, and it fully develops at what age? 25. About 25. You think of the moral decisions and things we ask of our teenagers. Okay, now keep asking them, but cut them some slack. Okay, down inside your brain here, you've got what's called the amygdala. It's the Latin word for almond. That's about the size of it. It records all your emotional memories ever since you were born. Brain research is growing exponentially. Your brain down here, amygdala, has recorded all your emotional memories. And the more significant the event, the more rapidly and easily it'll be recalled. So if I see a concrete truck coming, all right, and as a little 4-year-old, I was standing around with a group of friends where a concrete truck ran in and smashed over a fence and did a whole lot of damage, and I ran. That memory, that emotion, the fear, not just the content, but the emotion is stored there. And when I'm an adult man and I see a concrete truck coming, it will take me immediately to that same level of fear I felt as a 4-year-old. Right? And if I'm at work and I come home from work and I drive home and I'm really excited about seeing Carol, right? And so I'm sitting there I'm going to see Carol soon. So I start thinking nice thoughts, Steve, the same as you do for when you're going home from care. And so I think, I'm going to see Carol soon, and I think, I'll get her some flowers, and hasn't got a new nightie for a while, and card. So I'm really excited, and I'm sitting at work, I'm just walking out, and the boss says, Traff, can I just see? And my heart sinks, because this is my boss. 5 minutes is 45, you know. I don't have time to ring Carol or send her a message, and I certainly can't, while so I'm sitting there, and he raves on and on. Finally, he says, sorry, Traff, you can go now, and it's quarter to 6, and I'm really angry, you know. So I think, no, I can redeem this. It's going to be okay. So I'm driving home, and all my lovely thoughts about Carol comes back to mind. And so I drive in the driveway, and I didn't get flowers, didn't have time, didn't get a card, skipped the nightie. Looks better without it anyway. Drive in, pull up, and there's Carol standing on the veranda like this. What's the first thing Carol says? Do you know Carol? Where have you been? But how does she say it? Where have you been? Where have you been? Now, when I see Carol, right, standing there like this, my amygdala, without me knowing it, scans my emotional memories. Right, this is what researchers show us. And it does it in 15 milliseconds. They don't bother trying to keep track of it, right? And it asks these sort of questions. Have I been here before? Is this a safe place? Am I okay? If the answer is no or not sure, my alarm system kicks in. Ding, 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 ding. It sends adrenaline into my body. I'm ready for fight or flight in 15 milliseconds. That's how it works. Think about the impact on marriage. So I get out of the car. Where do you think I've been? I've been at work. Why didn't you call? Well, I didn't have time. Of course you had time. I didn't have time. I was sitting at the boss. You know what he's like? Well, you could have sent a message. I can't send a message sitting there in front of the boss. And if I did, you won't find it. Your phone's down the bottom of your handbag under the kitchen sink and everything else. You never switch the thing on. Don't talk to me like that. I'm going back to work. In 15 millis. No. You with me? Now, I'm a bit unfair because we do a whole workshop on this stuff and I've given, but think about the impact on marriage. It's huge. And that's what happens. Right? And we call what we call amygdala hijacking, where we get hijacked by our amygdala. And how is it that all of a sudden I'm fighting? And it was going to be this wonderful moment with my wife and we're about to rip it. What the heck happened? because you got a trigger from somewhere that took you back to my memory. Because who used to stand just like Carol did when I came home and saw her? Who used to stand just like that when I was a little kid? My mum. Now, in my story, I'm going to tell you she's an alcoholic mum. She wasn't, but if you've got an alcoholic mum and you're petrified of your mum and she's standing there, it just takes you back to those fears, just like you were as a 4 or 5-year-old, but you're an adult man now, but that's the emotion that you're dealing with. Not the content, the emotion. Okay? So it has a profound effect. So our body lets us know that. All right, let's go quickly, then we take a break and then we do part 2. Failed repair attempts. What do we mean by that? These are really important. A repair attempt is any little fun thing we do to put the brakes on. All right? A little fun thing to do to put the brakes on. So if Chris and Marlene, and they don't, but let's say they had a bit of a thing, something came up, they're angry, and I know this doesn't happen footy, but you're angry with Marlene, right? And they start sort of, it's going backwards and forwards, and I call it who's got the biggest gun. That's a game we can't afford to play. Right? Have you heard of that game? We often played who's got the biggest gun. And what it works like this. I might say to Carol, we were going to meet at 4, and like it's 4:30. 4:30. Well, I didn't intend to. I couldn't do a lot about it. I'm sorry, and it's not as if you're ever late. Like me, late? No, I'm never late. Let's face it, I am always on time. Unlike you. Me? Your whole family is late. Your whole family always running late. It's not just you, it's your whole family. My whole family. Who's got the biggest gun? She's just hit me. I'm going to need a bigger gun. My whole family. When I think about your family, evolution's looking good. Your family. What about your family? Bunch of losers, crazy bunch. My family. Your family, evolution's got nothing on you guys. You're still in the slime pot. So you haven't even come out and developed. You're still down the bottom of the slime. Slime, eh? If you're a decent Christian, I've just called on the biggest gun. I've got God on my side. Beat that. And she can't beat God. She says, and walks off. We play it all the time. We always got to find the biggest gun. It's ridiculous. So don't play that game, okay? Who's got the biggest gun? And a repair attempt, stop looking, I got it. A repair attempt is where we say, no, cut it out. And John Gottman records where this couple, they started a bit of an argument, and they were going backwards and forwards, and finally the lady, she stood like this, put her hands on her hips, leaned forward, went, and poked her tongue out at her husband. He knew it was coming up, and he went, back at it, and they both started laughing. Fabulous. A fabulous repair attempt. But see, if you and I are going, we've got so much negativity in our marriage, a repair attempt as powerful as, honey, I love you, we'll just go straight over the top. Love me? Yeah, you said that 4 years ago. Yeah, big deal. And we've just missed that repair attempt. So we've got to learn not only to give but also receive repair attempts. And couples who are going down the gurgler failed to read repair attempts. And it's a matter of putting the brakes on, slowing it down. In a game of basketball, if things aren't going too well, what do? What's that one? Time out. Right? And the coach, they do a bit of strategy stuff. And then what's he do? Where does he send the team? Back onto the court. Back onto the court. Men, you and I need to recognise it's okay, in fact, it's a pretty good skill. If there's a lot of heat in an argument, the best thing we can do is actually walk away. Because what I've shared with you, you've got all that adrenaline going through your body, you're ready for fight or flight, you're going to do a lot of damage. The best thing is to walk away, but come back. And I got an A grade for stonewalling for about 5 days, 6 days, 2 weeks. Yeah. And I've got to come back. Remember John Gray put out that book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and he talked about men going into their cave. It's a retreat mechanism, ladies. We just got to have time out. But I had a lady come to me one day with tears in her face. She said, Treff, how long am I supposed to let my husband stay in the cave? Okay. Come out of the cave, guys. Get brave. Put on the whole arm if you have to do, and come on out and reconnect. That's important. Finally, bad memories. We're going to take a break and then we're going to look at the good stuff. What do all the good couples do, the ones who survive? Bad memories. This really isn't so much, I guess, a sign as the final thing. What we tend to do when things are really, really difficult in a relationship is we tend to translate the past in the way we're feeling in the present. So if we're not feeling very positive all about our relationship, what we tend to do is to rewrite the past negatively. And so we'll say things like, well, I never really loved her anyway. And we tend to forget the good times. And John Gottman, the illustrator, he asked this couple once who were in trouble, he said to this guy, tell me a bit about your wedding day. And this guy was sitting there and he got a bit embarrassed. He tapped his foot on the floor and he said, well, it was raining and you were flirting in the back seat with the best man, and that's all he could remember about his wedding day, And that couple did divorce, right? So we tend to rewrite the past to reflect our present.